Self-care isn't selfish. It's sacred. Reclaim rest, renewal, and wholeness as acts of faithful discipleship. Join Sycamore Creek for this 4-week series to break free from burnout and embrace God's call to holistic well-being. Your soul needs a rest. Let's find it together.
Take a couple big, deep breaths with me. Too often we think that self-care is selfish, like it's being lazy or somehow just over-pampering yourself. It's a luxury. We wear exhaustion as if it's a badge of honor and busyness as if it is holiness. Busyness is next to godliness. We push ourselves to burnout. We say yes to everything, and then it ends up leading to exhaustion. Dr. Shaniqua Walker-Barnes is a psychologist, a theologian, a professor, and a preacher. She also happens to be a personal friend of mine and Sarah from our days at Duke Divinity School. So I might sometimes forget to call her Dr. Shaniqua Walker-Barnes and just refer to her as Shaniqua, my friend. But Dr. Walker-Barnes wrote a book called Sacred Self-Care. This summer, Pastor Mikkel and Pastor Sunrisa will be leading a small group based on this book. Dr. Shaniqua Walker-Barnes says, our hyper-capitalist society is built on a slave economy, which reduced people to commodities to be exploited. The logic of this economy persists today. It teaches all of us that our worth is dependent upon our productivity and our service to others. All right, let's unpack that just a little bit. There's a lot in there. She's basically saying that our economy was built under the value of enslaving people for profits. I mean, that's kind of how our country worked to begin with. And that value, while we no longer technically enslave people, that value lives on in that we see value in people based on their productivity, how efficient and effectively they can produce things, and their ability to, purchase things, their purchasing power. Mix this value of profitability and productivity with, self-care, and you end up with self-care as just like another set of services and products that you buy, like gym memberships and trainers or beauty products that are now marketed as self-care or skincare, travel and vacation destinations, wellness retreats, retail therapy, vitamins and supplements, spa treatments, a day of golf. Now, I'm not intending to imply that any of these things are inherently bad. In fact, they can all be good in their own and right way, but they are not the basis of self-care as we have been marketed to. Our culture teaches us to prioritize output, productivity, and efficiency over the care of our own selves. It's a sort of 24/7 on demand that we work. In fact, one of my favorite Instagram or TikTokers is the real Veronica. And many of her voiceovers have been used to create, animations about the challenges of work. Here's one in particular that I really like.
Hi, good morning, Veronica. Do you have a quick second?
Yeah.
I sent you a time-sensitive email yesterday. I haven't received a response.
Well, I just got in, so I am checking my emails now. I should be responding to yours within a few minutes.
Oh, okay. So when you first got hired in orientation, they should have shown you how to download our email system onto your cell phone. This way you don't have to be at your workstation in order to receive the emails.
They did. I just opted out of that option because I don't check my email after hours.
We really, really appreciate when our team members have access to their work email just because, we get requests in 24/7 and we want to be able to be there for our clients. I hope that makes sense.
I'm not a 24/7 employee, Janet. I'm so sorry. There's just no way that you're going to have access to me after 5 p.m. If you want me to be on call and you want me to respond after hours, that's fine, but that's going to require some on-call pay or a stipend. But I'm not just going to have the email on my phone and let you have access to me whenever you want. If it's a dire emergency, as a manager, I think you can take care of it. And if it's not an emergency, it can wait till 9 a.m. the next day. But I'm not downloading email onto my phone, not work-related email.
For a lot of us, that cuts really close to home. I know in a lot of ways it does for me as a pastor. I don't have clear 9 to 5 hours. But so many of us are caught up in this sort of like, I have to compete. I have to, when you're in school, get good grades so you can get into a good school, so that you can get a job, so you can get the nice life and lifestyle that you want. A nice house that's safe and comfortable, a good car, fashionable clothes and accessories. We end up ignoring the signs that something's not right, the physical, emotional, spiritual, relational signs. Constant headaches from stress or skipping meals due to workload, feeling irritable or short-tempered with loved ones, neglecting prayer and worship because we're too exhausted to engage. This can happen in nonprofits and charities like the church as well. It's hard to say no to the mission or the need that a nonprofit exists to meet. People like teachers, administrators, or staff, well, in many ways, they have to take their work home with them to even accomplish the work. Admittedly, many nonprofits and charities can be run in a very disorganized fashion, so that they end up calling you at the last minute and saying, can you volunteer? And it's also really hard to say no to the pastor. Self-care gets hijacked by things that are really not very good for us in the long haul. Endless social media scrolling, escapism into video games, binge watching streaming shows, overeating comfort foods. Neglecting self-care is a particularly challenging problem for Black women that Dr. Walker Barnes highlights in her book, but also in several talks and speeches that she has online. Here's just a little taste of one of those.
When I was a clinical psychologist, I would have women who would come in and tell me how their pastors would praise their strength in front of the congregation, in ways of saying, look at sister such and such. She's just such a strong woman of God. And the pastor would never know that they were in therapy, that internally they were crumbling, that the strength they portrayed was a myth. It wasn't real. It didn't reflect what was happening to them internally. And so all of those are ways in which the church does that.
None of these things, like being available to read an email after work or saying yes to nonprofits and immediate needs, none of these things is inherently wrong, but they can all lead to a certain posture, a certain disposition, a certain rhythm of life that is ultimately more destructive than it is life-giving. They become empty calories that we consume that do nothing for our health. We end up becoming slaves, enslaved to them, to these things, to this way of life, to saying yes all the time. Dr. Walker Barnes says we lack self-care because we do not know how to cease. We do not know how to cease. One of my favorite sort of anti-motivational slogans is about people who climb Everest. Here's one of the original video audios that's used quite often for Instagram Reels.
This is a friendly reminder that every dead body on the top of Mount Everest used to be a very motivated person, so I think maybe we should just calm down a little bit and have some dessert.
That is such a good reminder. Every dead body on Everest was once a very ambitious person. Remember that. Remember that. Hey, I'm going to ask you a question here just a minute for you to put your answer in the chat or turn to a neighbor. But before we do that, I want to just give you a moment to take a couple deep breaths with me. Let's do that right now. All right, here's the question. When was a time you felt the pressure to produce and you sacrificed self-care for the sake of efficiency, output, productivity, or some other goal? Let's talk about it. All right, take a couple big deep breaths with me. We're starting a new series today called Sacred Self-Care, and if you haven't caught it yet, it's based on a book by my personal friend, Dr. Shaniqua Walker Barnes. It's of the same title, Sacred Self-Care. This book is actually a 7-week daily devotional with daily guides and daily steps and suggestions for sacred self-care. And you can pick it up in our micro bookstores or wherever you like to purchase books. This series is in a bigger project that we're working on, working through Jesus' most famous teaching, the Sermon on the Mount. And that sermon is found in Matthew chapter 5 through 7. And we just want to give you a little taste to capture what it is we're in the middle of right now.
It's time to go deep by going up the mountain. Spend time with Jesus' most well-known teaching, the Sermon on the Mount. Over 18 months, we're covering it all in 14 series inspired by Jesus' themes and topics, everything from enemies and relationships to money and prayer. So go deep by going up the mountain with Jesus and Sycamore Creek.
All right, so this is a series of series based on ideas inspired by the Sermon on the Mount. Now, this one actually goes back really directly to the Sermon on the Mount. So let's read what Jesus says about, care for yourself. That is why I tell you not to worry about everyday life, whether you have enough food and drink or enough clothes to wear. Isn't life more than food and your body more than clothing? Jesus here is questioning some of our cultural motivations or the things that our culture tells us are really important, or maybe even that are important. But he's asking some questions, some fundamental questions about that. And he continues. Here's what he says. Look at the birds. They don't plant or harvest or store food in barns, for your heavenly Father feeds them. And aren't you far more valuable to God than they are? Can all your worries add a single moment to your life? Jesus is basically pointing us to a world of abundance. There is enough for everyone. There's enough for everyone. And reminding us that you are a beloved child of God. You are valuable. He goes on, and why worry about your clothing? Look at the lilies of the field and how they grow. They don't work or make their clothing. Yet Solomon in all his glory was not dressed as beautifully as they are. Now, Solomon is known as being sort of ancient Israel's most wealthy and well-regarded king. But what Jesus is pointing to is the simplicity of beauty, or the beauty of simplicity. He goes on, and if God cares so wonderfully for wildflowers that are here today and thrown into the fire tomorrow, He will certainly care for you. Why do you have so little faith? Faith is a kind of trust that there will be enough, that God will provide. Now, Jesus isn't here trying to say, don't work. I think what he's saying is, don't work with this underlying sense of anxiety, without the restless toil. So don't worry about these things, saying, what will we eat? Or what will we drink? What will we wear? These things dominate the thoughts of unbelievers. But your heavenly Father already knows all your needs. There are things in our culture that we need to resist. There are things that we need to let go of, toiling towards or toiling for. Not everything is worth driving after. Well, Jesus continues, "Seek the kingdom of God above all else and live righteously, and God will give you everything you need." Here's the foundation: God's kingdom, God's reign, the love of God for all, God's love and justice. And it's not the thing that we toil after, but it's the really real. It's the thing that gives us real life. It reorients our lives. It reshapes our priorities. It redirects our ambitions. So don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will bring its own worries. Today's trouble is enough for today. I think Jesus is encouraging us or pointing us towards a sort of mindfulness, a sort of presence, a sort of pay attention to what God is doing right in front of you. Like, wake up. God is at work right there in front of you, providing and protecting. Open your eyes, open your hands, open your heart and your ears. Hear, see, experience God's abundant provision right here, right now. Jesus invites us into rest, not relentless toil. All right, I'm going to give you another chat question, but let's take a couple deep breaths. I'm going to do this a little bit different, okay? Just follow along. Take a deep breath in and then hold it. In, hold, and then out. In, hold, and then out. In, hold, and then out. All right, here's a chat question for you. How do you react to Jesus' teaching about worry? Is it helpful, unrealistic, or maybe you have some other reaction? Let's talk about it. All right, just take a minute here with me or a moment and just breathe. Not any special kind of breathing. Just breathe and pay attention to how you breathe. Dr. Shaniqua Walker-Barnes says, "Sacred self-care is not an act of indulgence. It is an act of resistance." Don't miss that. Sacred self-care is an act of resistance, she's saying. Much like Sabbath keeping, self-care subverts the beliefs that we must do and be more, that everything must happen now, that our worth is determined by our titles, our achievements, and our productivity, and that we must be the ones who keep the world spinning on its axis. Is self-care selfish? No. Self-care is sacred. All right, I'm going to send you down a sort of imaginary thought experience. Here we go, all right? So imagine a car. And consumerism tells you that self-care of that car is buying new rims, a new stereo, a custom wrap, a car wash membership. At our Eastwood campus for a minute, there was going to be a car wash next to it. And I've always wanted a car wash membership, but I've never thought that I should spend the money on it. But I was like, oh man, I get to finally do it because it's building a relationship with our neighbors. But now an Aldi's going in. All right, none of these things in and of themselves are bad. There's nothing wrong with a new stereo. There's nothing wrong with getting your car washed. But that's not what your car really needs to run. That's not what it really means to take care of your car, to keep it doing what it's built and meant to do. Self-care of your car is making sure the tank is filled with gas or the battery is fully charged. It's making sure the oil is changed regularly, that the tires are rotated and the tread isn't too bare, that the brakes work, that there's windshield wiper fluid, or the interior is cleaned at least from time to time so that you can sit in the seats. All of these things are required for the car to do what it was, meant to do, what its purpose was, which was get people from point A to point B. There's nothing selfish about doing any of these things with your car. It's just basic car care. Self-care allows us to serve from abundance rather than depletion. Rest restores our relationship with God and with others. Self-care, it gives us the energy that we need to do what God has called us and purposed us to do. Sacred self-care integrates our spiritual, physical, emotional, mental, and relational well-being. So what Dr. Walker Barnes suggests are 7 basic self-care practices that we need to do that don't actually cost any money. They're just the basic things that you need for you to do what you were created to do. Here's the first one. Hydrate your body. I mean, we hear about this all the time. Drink water. Your body needs water. I mean, you are mostly made up of water. So hydrate yourself. That's the first basic thing that you need for self-care. The second is mindful eating. Take time to eat meals mindfully. Be present. Savor every food. Don't just shovel it in your mouth. I mean, one of the basic ways of having a meal is to put it on a plate and sit down and eat it. Don't just eat out of your pantry, out of bags, like you're snacking all day long. The third basic is prioritize rest. Set a consistent routine of when you go to bed. Like, go to bed every night at that time. And you all know the idea of sleep hygiene. It's like, what are the things that you need to do to have a good night's sleep? Well, one of them is get off screens an hour before you try to fall asleep. I know that's so hard, but it's a basic of self-care. Number 4 is move for health. Now, this doesn't require you getting a gym membership. Just go on walks, get up and move around, especially if you sit at your job most of the day. Add some movement or some, biking or any kind of small, light exercise throughout the day. Another basic is mental and spiritual wellness. Schedule time for prayer, for meditation, or for deep thinking. Do you have any time like that set aside each day? Another basic of self-care is nurture relationships. Do you know when you're next going to get together with a close friend? Especially if you're married, sometimes we can begin to think that our family or our spouse is our best friend, and that may be true, but your marriage is going to be better off if you have friends outside your marriage. Prioritize spending time with a friend. And a final basic self-care that Dr. Walker Barnes points us to is this: be a good shepherd to yourself. In other words, treat yourself with the same care that you treat others. Sometimes we're kinder and more gentle and more merciful with others than we are with ourselves. Be that same kind of good shepherd, kind of like being a pastor to yourself. This isn't selfish or lazy or luxury. This is like basic car care, car maintenance, like having enough gas or having windshield wiper fluid or making sure that the tread is on your tires or your brakes work. It's not selfish. It's sacred. Before we get into another chat question, let's just take a moment, catch our breath, just pay attention. Just take a moment of silence. Pay attention to the sounds that are around you, to your breathing. All right, here's another chat question. What are the basics of self-care that you need to reclaim in your life? Hydration, mindful eating, prioritizing rest, move for health, mental and spiritual wellness, nurturing relationships, or being a good shepherd to yourself? Let's talk about it. All right, take a couple breaths with me. back in January, we did a series about change. It was at the beginning of the year. That's a time when we're often thinking about change. And I want to remind you of a couple of tips for making changes that I think can help us when it comes to self-care. You make a new habit by making it obvious and making it easy. And then stack habits on top of each other. Say, I will do this after I do this. So if you want to drink more water, don't put your water bottle away in your cupboard. Put it out right on your kitchen table, right where you eat breakfast, so that you have it right there to take with you every day. Then stack these habits on top of each other, these self-care habits. You already stop and eat lunch each day, or at least I hope you do. And if you don't, then let's start with that. Stop and eat lunch. And when you stop to eat lunch, take a quick minute to pray. And then after you eat lunch, go on a quick walk with a friend. And while you're walking, drink water. Do you see how I stacked 4 self-care habits on top of each other? This could simply take like 20 or 30 minutes. This is your lunch break at work. Give that a try. The best way to serve God is to steward the divine gift of yourself. A steward is somebody who cares for something that's not their own. The expectation is that when the person who owns it comes back, you can give it back to them in as good or better condition than they gave it to you. God gave you your body. God gave you your well-being. How are you stewarding what God has given you? I remember reading an article in the Harvard Business Review many years ago that was basically helping CEOs think through what their role as a CEO was. And a big question they asked themselves was, well, what is the only thing that only you can do? You and only you as the CEO can do it. And so I remember writing out a list of things that I and only I could do as the pastor of Sycamore Creek. And as I was working on that list, it hit me that the number one is that the only person who can take care of this body, this person, is me. Now, yes, it's a communal effort and there's lots of things that go into that. But ultimately, the only person who can really make the decisions about my own self-care is me. Nobody else in the church can do that. That's my first principle of leadership. Take care of myself. Now, in church, a lot of times the way that we think about it is we think about, well, I'm going to go to worship or to my small group or to some ministry and get filled up so that I can then fill up or pour out into other people around me. If you were to kind of illustrate that visually, it might look something like this. I was filled up so that I could fill others up. The only problem with this way of thinking about it is then at the end, I'm empty again. But there's another way that this could happen. Watch. All right, let me try it again. That's a good blooper reel. All right, let's see if we can do that better. All right, that was better. Now, in this instance, the cup is still full, and this cup is full. It reminds me a little bit about like those party fountains. Have you ever seen one of those, like a fondue fountain, like this chocolate fountain? All right, these are all images of what the church could be like. It's like out of the fullness, out of a full tank that is always full, that is always like well taken care of. Our lives, our love is poured out into those around us. I want to be a church that's like a chocolate fondue fountain. That would be fabulous, to be known as the church where you come and you get filled up, and those in the church don't get depleted in the process. Let's be that kind of church. Self-care allows us to serve from abundance rather than depletion. A church where well-being is honored rather than neglected. Families and individuals prioritize connection over commitment. This is a movement of followers of Jesus who, well, they serve without getting burnt out. Being this sort of church, well, that changes our community and our world. So let's take a moment again, and let's just breathe. Go and be that kind of person.